Today we are going to take a deep dive into this visual, and what it is and ultimately isn't doing to help the story. We'll kick off night 2 of the 5 Nights at Freddy's and discuss Foxy's big introduction. Oh, and for the bonus bit, Abby will ask, what's my motivation? But first we're going to talk about Max, and why we should have seen her squirm. I am your guiding voiceover, Mr. Mid himself. Thank you for joining me here on Everything is Mid. Episode 8, Second Night at Freddy's. Like any good day, our episode starts with breakfast. Disappointed to the max. And what's the special on today's menu? Why, it's evil Aunt Jane meeting with her idiot lawyer Doug, the ambitious criminal Jeff, and his sister, Max. Yes, that is Max. I actually had trouble recognizing her at first. Maybe it would have been more obvious if she had a signature nose piercing, or overt necklace, or something to just make her more immediately recognizable. Was it just me? Did you recognize her right away? Drop a comment below and let me know if I'm just blind, or if you did realize this was Max when the scene started. Good thing my 9-year-old was paying attention and set me straight. Now, before we get things rolling, I am obligated to point out a killer cameo here. Again, I'm sure you are a savvy viewer, and I'm not telling you anything you didn't already know. But, just in case you're new to the scene, this waiter here is none other than famous YouTuber Matt Pat. Yeah, he's made a few videos on the subject, and earned the respect of the FNAF community. Anyway, just as we were starting to like Max, we like Max, right? I mean, she helps out our protagonists when they're in a bind, and I think that makes her likable. Only now we find out that was all just a front. Turns out Max here doesn't mind not getting paid by Mike because she's already getting paid to spy on Mike for evil Aunt Jane. So, apparently, Max has been searching through Mike and Abby's house, looking for evidence to prove that Mike is endangering Abby. Apparently, Max has found nothing useful for Jane in this regard. Yeah, and you get the sense that she doesn't really like screwing over Mike and Abby, but she's doing it anyway, which just goes to show a lack of personal character. Don't be like Max, kids. Now, her brother is clearly the bad influence here. Jeff is even pushing to get paid for their time here at breakfast, and the lawyer is realizing that, as Jane's lawyer, he probably shouldn't be hearing these conversations. The lawyer is played by character actor Michael P. Sullivan, who delivers a convincingly comical performance. His eyes wide, and his general sense of being in over his head give him a genuinely funny presence in his scenes. His discomfort isn't eased any when Jeff suggests that they should just kill Mike, so Jane would get de facto custody of Abby. But Jane, while tempted, says no. Quick side note here, we're just meeting Jeff for the first time, so we have no idea who he is, and more importantly, how dangerous he can actually be. He floats this idea of killing Mike, but is this a serious suggestion? Did he surprise Max when he suggested that he could be a murderer? Or does Max already know, oh yeah, this is my brother Jeff, he goes around murdering all the time? I do think it's a missed opportunity to, at the very least, show Max's reaction right here in the scene when he suggests murder. It's a perfect opportunity to show her horror or disgust or concern for Mike or Abby or something. Anyway, Max points out that Mike needs this new job to look good on paper for the judge, and her inspired brother comes up with a plan to trash Fazbear's so that Mike will lose his job, and the judge will take away Abby and give her to Jane, who really needs the money, guys. Like, she really, really needs that money. Oh, she needs it. The price is established for this ne'er-do-wellery, and the deal is done. And while Jeff's plan sounds good in the coffee shop, it does have one massive logic flaw that kind of ruins the whole thing. It's something we're going to want to check in on later, and when we here at Everything is Mid have nefarious schemes that we want to check in on later, we try to keep track of them here on the big board. So, is Jeff a criminal mastermind or an amateur thug who's getting in way over his head? I think we know what the answer is going to be, but for now, let's just make a note of Jeff here. We'll get back to this one sooner rather than later, and when we do, you are going to laugh at the nonsensical absurdity of his plan's actual logic. Well, at least in its execution. The story has effectively used this gathering of unseemly bottom feeders to balance out their menace with humor. Despite the issues we've previously stated regarding her character's motivations, evil Aunt Jane is played perfectly by Mary Stuart Masterson. Her performance keeps the RBF on lock, while adding just a splash of Cruella de Vil to match the film's loose grounding in reality. Masterson's Aunt Jane is an egotistical, abrasive, take-charge jerk that clearly has disdain for all these people. There's good chemistry between the actors as Jane confronts Jeff's bravado while simultaneously keeping her lawyer on a tight leash. As long as we're calling out the actors, David Lind is spot on as the rough-around-the-edges, opportunistic Jeff. Lind brings a nice intensity to the role, easily conveying that he'll do whatever it takes to get some cash. And then there's Kat Connor Sterling, playing the sour, dour wallflower, who is clearly not happy to be involved in all of this, but lacks the spine required to stand up and be a better person. She's sympathetic, but also just pathetic. While the introduction of our characters and subsequent story elements hasn't been flawless, it certainly has been functional, with some moments even feeling a bit inspired. Most importantly, everything tracks. Why, even the addition of Evil Aunt Jane's flunkies here is a nice escalation. I have to say, this was a pretty enjoyable scene. Later, Mike is trying to get the Nebraska poster off his ceiling. It's actually a nice opening to the scene, because at first we don't understand what he's doing, and then when we realize what he's doing, we don't know why he's doing it. Then, Abby enters the room wearing Mike's security vest. She wants to go to work with him, but why? Remember, it's good for characters to have goals and motivations, but those goals and motivations have to make sense, and here, we have no idea exactly what would motivate Abby to want to go to work with Mike. Why has she shown an interest now? Well, let's think about it. Clingy. But up until this moment, Abby has been shown to be a loner. There has been no indication that she wants or needs to stick close to Mike. Freddy Fazbear's is cool? Nothing about Mike's job appears to be appealing to Mike's little sister. There has been no indication that Abby has any interest in Fazbear entertainment, nor in the general genre of restaurant, or in creepy old buildings, or anything. In fact, later, spoilers, Mike will present her with a toy Fazbear's badge, and she will demonstrate a complete lack of interest. Is Abby drawn to positions of authority? Maybe Abby likes the idea of being in a position of authority, and putting on Mike's security vest means that now she's the boss of him. Mike can't tell Abby what to do because she's the one wearing the vest of authority. Only she doesn't care about the power and authority that the vest represents. And as we've established in the previous point, she didn't care about the perceived power and authority that supposedly would come with the Fazbear badge either. So it's definitely not this one. Is there a spooky need? While it will soon be revealed, spoilers, that Abby is going to have a connection to the creepy kids in Mike's dreams, there is no indication that her sudden interest to go to work with Mike is due to any influence by the creepy kids. However, this could have been an opportunity to lay some groundwork in regards to her spookiness. And since Abby will be revealed to have a bit of shine to her, why miss any such opportunity to set this stuff up? Oh, and what do I mean by shine? It's a reference to Stanley Kubrick's iconic cinematic horror adaptation of Stephen King's book, The Shining. In that movie, a little boy, not much unlike Abby here, has a sixth sense that allows him to have a confusing and upsetting connection to otherworldly spirits. Or something like that. Another character, who has similar extrasensory perception, explains how his grandmother described it. She called it shining. So yeah, I guess you could say Abby's gonna do a little shinin' later, but I digress. Is it that Abby doesn't like Max? This could also work. However, she doesn't seem motivated by an aversion to Max. The movie hasn't established that Abby thinks Max is boring, nor has it established something like Abby doesn't trust Max. Say, mistrust would be another opportunity to set up Abby's spooky intuition. Like she just has a bad feeling about Max. Mike, whose back is up against the wall and needs a babysitter, could quickly dismiss Abby's sixth sense. Like, oh, not that spooky stuff again, Abby. And Abby would say, no, I'm serious. And Mike could say, just give it a rest. And then the camera could hold on Abby, who is clearly taking this feeling of intuition way more seriously than Mike. And that would signal to the audience that maybe we should all take Abby's intuitions a little more seriously. Unfortunately, while any of these motivations could work, our writers have opted for no motivation at all. So yeah, Abby is doing that thing again that we don't like to see characters doing, namely becoming little more than a plot device, a game piece that writers are moving around and making them do things without the character having any internal motivation to do so. Thus, the scene feels more like filler designed to remind us that Mike and Abby are brother and sister, and this is the kind of relationship they have, and blah 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 blah. It's basically cute and there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it, but whenever a scene isn't economically doing something, it's a red flag that the script may be in trouble. The reality is that with a tight screenplay, there is absolutely no room for superfluous beats, much less superfluous scenes. In a well-crafted story, every second of screen time is doing something, if not multiple things, to further the story. When a scene is simply hitting the plot points necessary to get us to the next scene, then that scene is wasting potential opportunities to elevate the storytelling to a higher level of quality. You want that story to be lean. And quite frankly, the more story fat you have in your screenplay, the less engaging your story will be to the audience. So, what could we do with this scene? Well, this is the first time we've seen Max since we learned she was spying for Aunt Jane. Knowing what we know about Max, this would have been a fantastic opportunity to make her and the audience squirm. Imagine if she and Mike had a moment here where Mike confides in her. We see him open his heart and be vulnerable. He lets Max know how much he appreciates what she's been doing for him and Abby. Maybe he scraped together some money in a pathetic attempt to pay down a mere fraction of what he owes her. Or maybe he's giving her his watch because he says it's real gold or something. And she'd wither and say, "Oh no, you don't have to, it's fine. I know you'll pay me when you can." Maybe Abby joins in and gives Max pictures she drew for her, where Max looks like an angel. Or Mike could just tell her that he doesn't know what he and Abby would do without her help. Mike could tell Max what a good person she is, how the world needs more decent people like her. And all the while, both we and she would know how wrong Mike is, and we would see how crappy Max feels about herself. And then he goes to work, leaving her with her conscience. By forcing Max to confront her own duplicitous behavior, we'd have an opportunity to see her struggle with her deception. And the more she struggles with it, then the more sympathetic her character would be to the audience. The audience wants Max to make the right decision, and would find themselves rooting for her, hoping that she comes around and does the right thing. And if this were a horror movie where bad things happen to people who make bad decisions, Max would be choosing her own fate. The more opportunities we have to root for Max, the more emotionally invested we will be in her outcome. And if that outcome isn't a good one, well, we're going to feel the emotional impact of that tragedy. So that's what the scene could have done, but what it did instead was this. One curious look from Max as Mike leaves Abby and says to Max, "She's all yours." As you can see, we have now had two scenes where Max, as a character, has been underutilized in this story. First in the diner, and now here with Mike and Abby. In both cases, Max is in the scene, but doesn't really get to engage or develop as a character. And that's why we here at the EIM editorial offices are disappointed to the max. This nightmare is getting a little foxy. This movie is Five Nights at Freddy's, and thus, allow me to officially welcome you to Night 2. The opening of this scene pays off the opening of the last scene by revealing that Mike was tearing down the Nebraska poster in his room so he could move it to the security office and continue his full sleep ritual here. Mike had a breakthrough sleeping on the job at his last night at Freddy's, and now he's looking to double down and go deeper down that sleepy road. On one of the security monitors, we see that in the main room, the side stage is empty. While this means absolutely nothing to the average viewer, savvy fans of the Freddy franchise are left eagerly asking the question, where is Foxy?
Yeah, I'll do you one better. Who's Foxy?
Look, we here at Everything is Mid realize the core audience for this movie is already a fan of FNAF. They've played the games, read the books, and now they just want to see this universe brought to live-action life, with their favorite characters doing the stuff they do on the big screen. Maybe that fan is you, and that's great. Do we want this movie to cater to the fans? Absolutely. Always give the fans what they want, but do it in a way that also gives the general audience what they need. You know, those unsavvy viewers who are being introduced to FNAF for the first time. As popular as FNAF is, the general audience is still much, much larger than any specialized group of fans. And if the filmmakers play their cards right, they can potentially make a crossover hit that will thrill the old fans, win over new fans, and grow the film's audience way beyond that of the original limited fan base. And you know what that means? Yeah, So, getting back to Foxy, not only does the general audience have no idea who Foxy is, they don't even know that Foxy is a character that exists in this story world. Oh sure, they saw that poster featuring the Fazbear 4, but that's just meaningless window dressing to the general audience. So, when the movie reveals the empty side stage, no one outside of the fans are expecting a character to be there. No one outside of the fan base knows that this stage belongs to a character named Foxy. I mean, look around. This place is beat up and run down. Who knows what used to be on that stage back in the day? In fact, when Mike saw the characters on his first night at Freddy's, the audience saw 3 characters, and for all they know, there only are 3 characters. You see what I mean? Now, if on that first night, Mike and the audience had seen all 4 characters, including Foxy, and then this night we reveal to the audience that Foxy is missing, well then you'd have some suspense. But the audience can't wonder where Foxy has gone to if they don't know that Foxy is even a character. And if we reveal to the audience, but not to Mike, that Foxy was missing, the audience would be looking for Foxy and hoping that Mike would also see him before it was too late.
Right, that's quite enough of that.
So without laying any of that kind of groundwork, our introduction for this new character is this. Look, it's a fun shot, and it is an effective moment to alert us that Mike is in trouble. But if you're not already a fan of FNAF, this shadow reveal is too fast and too subtle for the unsavvy audience to know that this character isn't one of these characters. Now, the film does go out of its way to show the hook with the rest of the shadow, but geez Louise, you get this image buried in this image for less than a second? That's simply not enough time to clearly communicate the idea of dangerous hook. You see, the hook is the important piece of information here, so the hook needs to be emphasized. Maybe compose the shot so Foxy is standing near the camera, and we see the actual physical hook in the foreground, then the full shadow on the wall. My angles are a little wonky here, but you get the idea. This would clearly read that there is a character here who is defined by their deadly hook. It gets the audience wondering, hey, who is this killer hook guy? No, not him, him! Oh, the hook guy? That's Foxy. Ooh. So the stage moment doesn't fully read, and now the shadow moment doesn't fully read either. So it's almost like these 2 moments don't really even count towards Foxy's big introduction. And no, I guess this is not the first moment with Foxy. You may recall back in the movie's opening teaser scene, our first introduction technically was this shadow reveal, but that doesn't really count because they weren't actually introducing Foxy back then. They could have, but they didn't. He was more like part of the atmosphere, and yet they had Foxy humming in this scene. But they don't use the humming at all here, but then they do use it later, which, look, characters have traits. The audience associates characters with their traits. You know, Darth Vader has his dark helmet and his breathing. Jinx is psychotic and has her blue hair. Luffy has his hat, and whatever this is. And of course, we're all familiar with 7 of 9's attributes. You know, her computer-integrated parts and lack of social skills. And oh hey, this star thing has its juxtaposition of cute demeanor and morbid perspective.
The only hope is the sweet relief of death.
These and other traits help define a character and guide our expectations of who that character is and what that character will be like in any given situation. So far, we know that Foxy has a hook and he hums. Sometimes, I guess. And it's the sometimes part that's a bit annoying. My point is that when the audience is still getting to know a character, it helps to be consistent with their character traits. So, if Foxy is a hummer, then let's have him hum every time we see him. At least until the audience has spent enough time with him to remember who he is. So at least twice in a row to clearly establish a pattern of behavior. Oh, and let's make sure that we always see that hook. The bottom line here, Foxy doesn't get much screen time, so the filmmakers need to be consistent in their use of that screen time.
And now, back to our story.
Mike is asleep in the office chair, prescription pills on the desk. We'll later learn that these are sleeping pills. Headphones on his head, he's going for it, folks. He's doing the dream thing. This time, we start later in the dream. Garrett is taken, Mike chases on foot, the futility of the chase is obvious. Garrett! Mike turns to discover the creepy kids are back in the forest, staring at him, being all creepy again. He pleads for them not to run and begs for their help. They stare and he yells, "Who took Garrett?" Once again, the creepy kids bolt. This time, Mike chases Foxy Boy. That's the boy in the brown shirt. Mike grabs him by the arm. The boy spins around with a hook and gouges Mike's arm. I guess that's a lesson for all of us. It's just not a good idea to run around grabbing strange children by the arm, as you never know when one of them might have a gnarly sharp hook. It's a shame Mike had to learn that lesson the hard way. Yeah, I suspect this job of his probably doesn't come with a premium insurance package. Oh, and there it is, our third topic. Okay, wait your turn, creepy kid. One last visual to fumble this Foxy intro, and then we're out. Mike wakes up, and everything's going crazy. He heads to that big old breaker switch, and it's another flash of Foxy. An effective jump scare, I suppose. The light comes back on, and he's gone. But there's been no clear understanding of what Foxy's plan was or his motivation or anything. The Foxy-connected creepy kid did attack him in the dream. Is that because Foxy actually attacked him here? And if so, why did he leave now? Why not finish the job? Yeah, I know the basic point of all of this is to be vague and scary and make us wonder what's real and what's not. But the movie needs to make a definitive statement about what is actually happening. Did the Foxy animatronic have to be physically close to Mike in order for the creepy kid to be in Mike's dream? I doubt that. All the other animatronics weren't hovering in the hallway with Foxy, and those creepy kids were in Mike's dream. If the idea is that Foxy did physically attack Mike in the office at the same time the creepy kid attacked Mike in the dream, then movie, make that clear. Show us the blood dripping off of Foxy's hook. But not only does the movie not do that, it doesn't even show us the hook at all. See? No hook. Movie, this is Foxy. Why are you hiding his hook, movie? It wasn't here. It was hard to notice here, and now it's completely absent here. Why are you making this so hard on your unsavvy viewers? You know, the viewers you need to convert into fans in order to get more of this. Maybe we're wrong. We're not. But it's for these reasons that we here at the EIM editorial offices feel the FNAF film fumbled this Foxy introduction. But that's just us. How do you think the Five Nights at Freddy's movie handled Foxy's big first scene? Would you have done it this way? Let us know in the comments. And hey, while you're there, hook us up with a like. Alright, one last bit. Let's see if we can wrap this up by happier hour. Don't it make my brown eyes goo? Jumping back just a tick to Mike's dream, I wanted to take a moment to discuss this standout visual. It's great, creepy, unnatural, unsettling, and totally unexpected. Yeah, so the other problem with grabbing creepy ghost kids by the arm is that they are apparently prone to jump scares. Who knew? Up until this moment, this movie's horror has been all based on creepy tension and anticipation of the unknown. But this moment gives us a glimpse into what we're in for. The stakes have been raised, and now Mike and the audience know that there's potential for actual physical danger here. The visual itself does seem to be a nod to the FNAF lore character, the Crying Child, which is also associated with this other puppet marionette character. But outside of a potential Easter egg visual reference, there's no indication that any of the lore associated with this visual is also being incorporated into this movie's Foxy Boy character. I was just asking for comments right before this bit, but I am curious to hear what you lore keepers think about my whole Crying Child puppet speculation. I mean, do you think, visually speaking, that is what they're going for here? At any rate, for those of us not steeped in the greater FNAF lore to which this visual might perhaps be referencing, or not, I was still left wondering what the meaning was behind this visual. You know, outside of this in-the-moment need for a creepy jump scare. Let me give you an example of what I'm trying to convey here. Blood in the water is also an unsettling visual. And if you were swimming in the ocean and suddenly found yourself in a pool of blood, well, that would be terrifying. But why? Well, that blood has to be coming from somewhere, presumably a living creature. And if it's a great volume of blood, that means the living creature is probably not living anymore. And judging by the amount of blood, this no longer living creature is a big creature. And if a big creature has been quickly killed, then that means the thing that killed it must be even bigger. So while seeing blood in the water is in and of itself a creepy, unexpected, unsettling visual, that visual has the indirect meaning of both death and danger. And if you find yourself swimming in it, well, look out! You could be next. You see what I'm getting at? Or that at which I am getting? The blood in the water has a meaning outside of the unsettling visual in the moment, and that meaning comes from a logical connection to the unseen, danger and death lurking somewhere beneath the water's surface. So, I want to know what the black eye sockets and flowing inky tears is supposed to mean. And don't get me wrong, I don't expect to understand it right now in this moment. This moment is the shocking, jump scare, blood in the water moment. But I want to believe there's something beneath the surface of this visual that will later be revealed. A context that will make this visual make some kind of sense. Let's assume for a moment that the creepy kids are ghost children. They actually are ghost children. And let's assume these ghost children came to some unspeakable traumatic end. They actually did all come to an unspeakable traumatic end. And again, why each of these ghost children are associated with each of the Fazbear animatronics is still a mystery that will surely unfold as we continue to move through our movie narrative. And I think it's reasonable to expect that we will also be learning not only who killed the children, but why that person would engage in such unspeakable acts of evil. So now we know there's a kid. This child presumably died in an unseemly fashion, and now his ghost is showing us inky blackness running out of his eyes. What is he trying to tell us? What is this specific visual trying to convey? It should be connected to something about the character, and since it's weird and scary, it should probably be related to their untimely demise. Unfortunately, we here at the EIM editorial offices get the feeling that the filmmakers were just going for a scary visual, any scary visual, and in this case, they randomly went with black eyes, blah! Don't get me wrong, as I previously stated, it is effective. It's unexpected, shocking, gross, and creepy. However, all that said, I can't help but feel like this is another one of those lost opportunities that could have been used to enrich the storytelling. Imagine, if you will, the killer had drowned this child in a lake, and in the moment of this jump scare, when the creepy ghost child opens his mouth, instead of black ink, murky lake water just starts pouring out of his eyes and his mouth. It would have been equally unexpected, shocking, gross, and creepy. But it also would have told us something about this child, about his death. It wouldn't simply have been a jump scare. It would have used the jump scare as an opportunity to tell us more about the character, to do a little world building, and then, later, Mike would learn about this child's death. He'd learn about the drowning, and in that moment, both Mike and we, the audience, would then get a context for the previous creepy visual. We didn't understand the visual at the time of the jump scare, but now we would later understand why there was gross water coming out of that creepy kid's head. Not only would they have just paid off a setup, but the filmmakers would have added a whole new layer of horror to Mike's revelation, because in that moment, Mike would then realize that he had had a premonition about that child's death. You see, at the time when he had the waterhead jump scare dream, Mike didn't know who that kid was, or that the kid had died, and more importantly, he didn't know how the kid had died. He didn't know he had drowned. So how did that end up in his dream? How could he have possibly made that connection? He couldn't have. But the scary part is that he did make that connection. Which means one of two things is happening here. Either this dream was just a very eerie and very unlikely coincidence, or that ghost child is real and he's haunting Mike's dreams. And knowing a detail about that child's death that he couldn't possibly have known? That would have been more powerful than just a random, creepy, inky-eyed image. Now, obviously, this Foxy Boy creepy kid did not drown in a lake. And I'm not suggesting that for the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, they should be rewriting the lore to include a murderous lake scenario. I'm just offering an example of how the writers could have used that simple jump scare to enrich their story. Say, and speaking of that story, Mike wakes up. Everything's crazy. Flickering lights. Security screen static. They're really amping it up here. Oh, and the blaring music. We've got to mention the blaring music. Released in September of 1983, this song became the band's most successful single in the US, reaching number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. The band was the Romantics, and the song? Talking in Your Sleep. You get it? Mike's got creepy ghost kids communicating with him in his dreams, and the song is called Talking in Your Sleep. Good times, good times. Yeah, you gotta know that Blumhouse was doing cartwheels the day that music licensing was approved. Anyway, Mike throws the master power switch, rebooting the room. The music stops, and the buzzing starts. Wait, what buzzing? Oh, the doorbell. Uh-oh, looks like someone's busted. You've been watching Everything is Mid, Second Night at Freddy's. In our next episode, not only does Mike survive his second night at Freddy's, but he makes a friend along the way. And don't worry, she acts like a totally normal human being and a super professional police officer. We finally get a little bit of backstory behind this opening credit sequence, a tiny bit, and we take it upon ourselves to do a little more character work that the movie forgot to do in a little episode we like to call Officer Blondie. We'll be seeing ya.